Good afternoon. I'm extremely excited to be here at Elevate Tech Fest 2019. I'm proud to represent Capital One as a founding partner of Elevate, and again as a sponsor for this year's conference. And most of all, I'm excited to be around all of you. As I've been interacting with folks, innovators, entrepreneurs, whether you're in startups and small companies to large institutions, still that energy and that vibe and coming here to network and learn from one another is why I'm glad that we participate in events like this. I'm also, as my new home of Canada, excited about what I've learned so far in the space that Canada has carved out on the global landscape of technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. A couple data points I ran across include one from Industry Canada that shows that Canadians on a per capita basis are actually opening new ventures and companies at a faster pace than our neighbors to the south. And also, Bloomberg shows that Toronto here is an exceptional tech jobs hotbed, and that the tech job growth here in Toronto last year exceeded that of both the Bay Area and New York City combined. And so, exactly, you should. it's worth giving Canada and Toronto a hand. And so I'm excited to make this my new home. And I know that as we look at technology and innovation and how fast the world is moving and how fast that we as consumers, demand levels are just more and more exceeding what they were in the past, that we have been transforming what we've done. And if your organizations are like mine, we've been investing significant amounts in technology and transformation and thinking about how we modernize our data, how we move it all to the cloud, how we adopt new work practices, how we modernize our infrastructure, our platforms, our delivery mechanisms. But one thing I encourage us to do and want to speak a few minutes about today is not just modernizing the infrastructure, the software, the hardware, but modernizing leadership. Because people sit at the heart of everything that we do, both in terms of where we work and who we're aiming to serve. And the roles we all play as leaders, whether or not we lead teams or members of them, is really critical in how we inspire and motivate ourselves and the entire workforce. And so I wanted to talk a little bit because I think that there's 3 pillars to what I consider modernizing leadership. And each of them won't seem particularly new or novel on their own, but I do believe that collectively they are critical to our success to keep up with the increasingly accelerating pace that the global economy has really had us running for several years now. The first is really about setting our mind shifts. And really I like to think about this as don't box yourself in. And we talk a lot when we're talking about innovation and new product development and new software technologies of thinking outside of the box and how can we deliver new solutions. But this time I'm talking about don't box yourself in when you're talking and thinking about people who work for you, people you work with, and most importantly, yourself. And so going beyond the status quo and what you would consider, even if you've spent a lot of time training, getting education, having job experience in one area, but really pushing yourselves to think about how can we adapt and be flexible. And that could mean just learning a new discipline and carving out some time for that. It can mean taking a new role, moving to a new function, or even switching industries altogether. And so why is this important? It's because we're moving at a pace that the collection of these experiences and just assuming that the expertise in one area is sufficient may not be enough. Expertise is really important, but to get to next level problem solving, I think pushing ourselves to go and take on new opportunities is important for us to break through some of the existing paradigms. So I have to admit, this comes with risks. For some of us, this will mean stepping outside of our comfort zone, going from being the expert in the room to being the novice in the room who knows the least about the subject matter. It could mean stalling or sometimes longer career progression. And I think what scares many of us, including myself, is that it could mean failure when there's mistakes or missteps that are taken. But I do think the power and what you can bring and add value when you're coming into a new situation and have that lens outweighs all of those risks. So for me personally, it really started with me spending years of education and training in chemical engineering to then ending up of leading a financial institution who focuses on credit cards. It's not the path that one would expect, not the one that I did, but fortunately I got this advice early on of not boxing myself in. So when I knew academics wasn't the path forward, and I looked into what else I could do, I had myself open to enter the business world and do consulting. And so I entered that, and I did it in a completely different area and focused primarily on consumer goods, packaged goods, foods, consumer electronics, nothing like my engineering background, let alone chemical engineering. And then I learned to love that discipline. But like many, when I wanted to really become an operator and less so a consultant, I made another shift. I could have stayed in that area, but I had an opportunity to move into business process outsourcing and print services. Now that step was one for me that I knew wasn't going to be long term. One could say a misstep, a mistake, maybe it was a failure, and maybe it caused my overall trajectory in my career to be slower than it ended up. But that was okay. I learned things about myself. I gained international experience from that. And then I departed, learning more, even if that was a failure of sorts, but I don't think it was in the overall journey. Because when I got a call about joining Capital One, again, a completely new territory. Financial services was new to me. Lending and credit cards were new to me. But I trusted in some of the foundation that I'd built over time, all the way back from engineering through consulting through the other work. And I was confident that I could learn what I needed to, because I have a lust for learning, as many of us do, and that's why I think most of you are here. And so I took that, and I took that leap, knowing again that it could mean another pause, another mistake, another misstep, another failure. But instead, it really exposed me to a new area. And I do believe that on day one, I was able to contribute and add value, because the lens that you bring to a new situation with a different experience than those who grew up there or those who have had more experience than you is valuable. And that helps us get to the next level of problem solving, which is really a theme of why I think this and the other things I'll talk about are critical. And so I'd encourage everyone to think about this and take some risks and really think outside the box. Why I think this is important is the ability to adapt, be flexible, and move at the speed and the super fast speed that we need to. It's an important element that we have. And so now as you're taking a moment to think about yourself or maybe how you comprise your teams and make sure you're not boxing them in either, the second element is really thinking about diverse and inclusive teams. Right? How do we have complementary skills, different experiences, and bring them to bear, along with expertise and a lot of similar experiences? And for that one, it's really both about having people from different paths and thinking about recruiting from different areas and from different functions for something that you're trying to fill. But representation matters too. Because even with two identical resumes in terms of education, pedigree, and where people may have worked, the difference if different genders, races, sexual orientation, if someone had a disability, that matters in terms of how they experienced whatever's on that resume. And so both are equally important in building teams of complementary skills to, again, get to that next level problem solving. Thank you. And so as we think about this, I know me and our company at Capital One, some of the challenges with that we really need to face on the recruiting end. One is to think more broadly about, for campus hires, the universities that we recruit from. For experienced hires, it means not necessarily dismissing certain resumes or CVs that come across if they don't meet the exact criteria that we think we're looking for. And being more open to that, as well as being deliberate about trying to remove bias that exists in all of us from our recruiting process. That's from the screening up front, as well as how we do the interviews themselves, so that we're not using our presupposed view of who would be perfect for a certain role or who would be perfect composition for this team to override what could actually be the best solution to drive the most innovation and problem solving within the organization. And so that's a big part. The other part is just how we build the teams. At Capital One, one of the things we've done is adopted what technology, frankly, started with, is taking the concept of the full stack team, where we have our software engineers who can do the front end development and the back end development with the product managers, but really form the entire team around the problem we're trying to solve, whether it's a product, a customer experience, a new delivery mechanism, so that not only we have all the tech folks together end to end, but we include the business analysts, the finance analysts, legal, compliance, our risk managers, HR. Everyone has a seat at the table at inception of the idea, at the beginning of the problem solving. And so sometimes this takes some work and rejiggering of how you think about setting up your organizational structures. But the power that we have seen when we've done this, again, that next level step change problem solving has been amazing. But I'll be frank that just because I throw a bunch of people together in a room that come from different backgrounds and different experiences doesn't mean that it's a cohesive bunch that then align, forgot about that one, that then align magically to work in harmony to innovate. The other piece that's important is that it is an inclusive environment too. And what I mean by that is that everyone there feels that they are valued, they belong, and they have an equal voice and seat at the table. And this is where the third pillar really comes in, and the third element is how we think about step changing our emotional intelligence, and most importantly in that is empathy. And when you bring together folks that don't necessarily have natural connections that form based on the obvious similarities, because we're specifically picking people that are different and can complement each other and have orthogonal thoughts to one another. And the way I think about this and how you can go from just a group of people in a team to actually an organization of relationships is carving out work time to actually build the relationships. Being explicit about that and setting team goals that are aligned as equally around getting to know each other as in delivering the new product to market. And that time is well worth spent because it does two things. One, it helps actually form the connections that aren't necessarily obvious. And then two, it helps the second piece of empathy that's so important, which is allowing people, especially in moments of conflict, to put themselves in other people's shoes. And we encourage that so that when there is a conflict, when there's a disagreement, when there are competing ideas, that we actually take a moment to not necessarily just drop our opinion and agree with the other person, but to take a moment now that I have a relationship, now that I understand where they're coming from, what their journey may have looked like, and why they may have that perspective. That just starts a whole different dialogue. And so I think those competing ideas is what we need to actually, again, take problem solving to the next level and step change it. But it also is not an easy feat when there's conflict without that empathy, where there is no common goal in relationship, where you have an aim to try to get to an alignment and really aim with that solution. And it can't just be about wanting to deliver the best customer solution in the world, even if everyone is extremely passionate about that goal. People do need to care at some level about the other people that they're going after this goal for. And so overall, these are the elements that I see about modernizing leadership. It's really about setting the mindset and don't box yourself in so that we can adapt and change and be flexible the speed that we need. Coupling that with building with that mindset, a collection of people in diverse teams of both experience and of representation to actually drive the innovation, the problem solving in a way that we feel good working together on the same path. And the way that's possible is that last piece, which is step changing our overall emotional intelligence and how we permeate the importance of empathy throughout our teams, throughout our organizations, throughout how we lead. so that our end goal is that we as individuals and collectively can do more than we thought we could do, and in turn, organizations can go well beyond the original ambitions that they set forth. And so as teams and as modernizing leadership and as we think about the next gen leadership, it's really about the people at hand, how we think and work together and inspire, and really taking people and our businesses and leaving them in a better place than we found them. So thanks for your time, and enjoy the rest of TechFest.